Hey guys, my name is Grace and welcome to Grace Adventures. If y'all have been watching the past couple of videos that I have posted, you know I have been talking about the modern downfall of Busch Gardens Tampa and United Parks and Resorts, which is a whole rabbit hole when trying to find out the facts and piece everything together. In my last video about the shareholders meeting, I briefly brought two things to light. One, that Busch Gardens and SeaWorld are becoming less animal-centric parks. And two, there is nothing unique about United Parks and Resorts because they are trying to do the same thing as their competition, and I am looking to further expand this idea in this video. From my research, it looks like their brand identity is lost in their parks, especially Busch Gardens Tampa. And these parks are clearly underfunded for their maintenance, creativity, groundskeeping, overall park appearance, and good operations. It's crazy I say that, but one thing that has been super unique about Busch Gardens Tampa and SeaWorld Orlando that I saw when I was growing up with these parks is that they have animals. And back in the day, before they were owned by the same company, they encouraged learning and exploration, and that's one of the things that made them notable in the theme park world. I think it's okay to want to grow and expand your park, to try out new things, to get people into your park, even if you are slowly taking out the educational aspect of it, because as humans evolve, so does everything around us. With theme parks in today's age, I don't expect them to keep education in their parks like they once used to, and for everything to stay the same as it was once it first opened. As much as I love these defunct attractions, I think we're just evolving away from the educational aspect in these parks, and especially in SeaWorld and Busch Gardens. But growing up in these parks, you can see that it all kind of changed after SeaWorld and Busch Gardens were sold off to private equity. Busch Gardens and SeaWorld, before private equity took over, not only championed on thrill rides, but educational experiences as well. So let's begin and see how education is less involved in these parks today compared to back then. The first thing I'm going to say about this part of the video is I'm going to stop talking about the brief history of animals in Busch Gardens Tampa and SeaWorld when they install a big boy ride. I feel like that's a good stopping point to give y'all the over idea I want to give. So let's start with Busch Gardens Tampa and go back to the very beginning of its existence. Busch Gardens Tampa opened in 1959 by the beer company Anheuser-Busch as a brewery tour and bird gardens. So even from the start, animals were involved in the making of what Busch Gardens is today. And we still very much see this in the park with, for example, their iconic flamingos. Towards the beginning years of Busch Gardens Tampa, there were trained animal acts as well as free-roaming birds, and people even had a chance to touch the birds if they really wanted to. Fast forward to 1965 when Busch Gardens purchased and added the African velvet, which contained a variety of animals mostly imported from Africa, including cheetahs, chimpanzees, elephants, gorillas, lions, and rhinos, with habitats faithfully recreated by the park. At that time, Busch Gardens Tampa had acquired around 268 acres. Boma was one of Busch Gardens' earliest themed areas, which opened in 1970 and featured African mammals, birds, and a man-made mountain, which is now today's Nairobi section of the park. The monorail, manufactured by Aerodynamics, opened in 1966 and was used to travel over the park's safari animals. The Serengeti Express Railroad opened in 1971, and this train takes guests around the now 335-acre park, where they see hundreds of African animals on the Serengeti Plain and other attractions in the park. A new section called Stanleyville opened in 1973, as well as the water ride, Stanley Falls Flume, which became a defunct attraction in 2025. Alrighty, let's get to talking about SeaWorld now. So SeaWorld Orlando is the third SeaWorld park to open, but in this case, as we talk about the history of SeaWorld, we will date back this video to the very first SeaWorld park, SeaWorld San Diego. SeaWorld was founded by 4 UCLA graduates with no intentions to first build an entertainment park, but they wanted to build an underground marine restaurant, which was deemed infeasible. SeaWorld San Diego opened in 1964, and with just a couple of animals, and despite times of trouble, this park eventually grew to be a huge success. Shamu, their first killer whale, came into the picture in 1965, and this was before they thought of the repercussions that we see in our modern day when it comes to performing orca whales. This was something completely new at the time for many other marine parks, and as Shamu got more comfortable at the park, trainers would interact with it and put on shows. By 1967, Shamu became a brand, and they would acquire a couple more whales and start an in-house breeding program. There were also a couple of other forms of entertainment in the park, like skiing shows, a themed Japanese village, mermaids, and the Sky Tower, which helped amplify the SeaWorld image. The park's success in San Diego led to future locations in Ohio in 1970, Orlando in 1973, and San Antonio in 1988. The first ride to ever come to a SeaWorld park is Mission Bermuda Triangle at SeaWorld Orlando, a motion simulator ride in 1992. A long time ago, animals were one of the main focal points of entertainment when it came to drawing crowds. I'm not saying they threw education out of the window entirely, because it's still at the parks today, but I haven't seen them highly encourage it with many of their new additions or attractions. In terms of the past attractions, I see things like the monorail or the Sky Towers as assistive ways to see the animals, or another way to complement and keep the focus on the parks being more animal-centric parks. Mission Bermuda Triangle first opened in Orlando to compete with Disney World and Universal Studios, and just thinking about it, lots of people think this is when their downfall started as to why these parks are not as unique as they once used to be. But to compare back then to today, they still prioritized education and creativity in their attractions and entertainment they produced, and if something was broken, they would fix it. The SeaWorld parks were bought in 1989 by Anheuser-Busch, aka the people who owned Busch Gardens Tampa. And honestly, down the line, it made sense for SeaWorld to get a ride, because even Busch Gardens Tampa already had rides like Scorpion and Python. I'm not saying animals were being left in the dust when rides were installed back then and even today, because the parks still very much pride themselves on their animal habitats. But something changed when they started to focus more on the things such as concerts, festivals, and roller coasters. That thing might have been Blackfish, the documentary that came out in 2013 that forever harmed the image of SeaWorld. This documentary highlighted an orca called Tilikum that caused the death of 3 people and brought awareness to the safety of orca in close spaces, as well as the trainers. The lasting impact this film had was that they ended their orca breeding program in 2016, as well as their big theatrical shows, turning them into orca encounters instead, and this will be the final generation of orcas at the SeaWorld parks. Other impacts were that their corporate partners, like Southwest Airlines, ended their partnership with SeaWorld, and they lost money in the process, like their share prices dropping 33%, as well as a decrease in park attendance. SeaWorld blamed their loss of income on the seasonal nature of the business, when clearly almost every news outlet was reporting on the documentary, as well as it becoming widely popular on social media with tags like #EmptyTheTanks. The following year, in 2014, shareholders filed a lawsuit against SeaWorld, saying that the documentary misled investors about how big of an impact Blackfish was going to make. In February 2020, they finally paid $65 million to investors to settle the lawsuit. SeaWorld finally started to make a profit again in 2018, and this was when they started to shift their focus on high thrill attractions in their parks. And SeaWorld Orlando recently has even marketed themselves as the coaster capital of Orlando. I feel like for most people nowadays, a draw to go to Busch Gardens or SeaWorld are the roller coasters, and the animals are just add-ons where you might stop to look at the dolphins or the elephants for 5 minutes and be on your way to the next ride. Now, reasons for this could be reduced staffing, fewer ambassadors having knowledge of these animals, and fewer opportunities for guided learning chances around the park. But to be honest, it really shouldn't be, because they have many different keeper talk shows where they get to interact with ambassadors who take care of these animals. And you still get to see most of these animals up close and ask ambassadors questions about them. But real talk here. How many people do we think will actually purchase an annual pass or a fun card just for the lion and hyena ridge opening up at Busch Gardens, Tampa, or the reimagined shark encounter at SeaWorld San Diego this year? Since the parks have focused their shift towards thrill ride, the thematic areas that complemented the animals and other attractions have notably lost their depth, feeling more generic and lacking proper upkeep. And by proper upkeep, I don't even mean major updates, I just mean basic maintenance and care. For example, I can't remember the last time the Egypt area received any meaningful attention besides around the time when Cobra's Curse opened in 2016. I'm not saying the lion and hyena ridge or the reimagined shark encounter are bad additions to the parks, and I'm actually very happy they are investing time and energy into these habitats. But I don't think it's enough for people to want to spend their money on. I see most general park goers are more hyped for roller coasters than attractions to do with animals or educational experiences, and honestly, I'm not really surprised by this. I might be overreaching with this one, but I feel like we as a society, when we go to theme parks, we tend to prefer more thrill-seeking attractions rather than educational ones. For one, I feel like most people avoid learning outside of work or school because thinking is hard work for the brain. It's literally an exercise. And nowadays, people are so burnt out from life in general that they come to theme parks to have fun and not necessarily learn. And I feel like another reason is because theme parks nowadays are not producing very good educational attractions, and not like how they used to back then. The educational attractions aren't watered down or anything, but they're boring. I'll give an example. Expedition Odyssey at SeaWorld Orlando. This is one of their newest attractions that opened in 2025. And it's a motion simulator ride, pretty much taking you around Antarctica and seeing all the animals there. Long story short, they are actually retheming this ride that is not even a year old to Expedition Odyssey Fire and Ice, where guests will take on the role of Arctic researchers, and thank goodness. This is actually a great thing because I think SeaWorld is listening to the park guests and the feedback from this ride, which The feedback from Expedition Odyssey was not very good, and I'll tell y'all why. As you enter the building for Expedition Odyssey, you enter the queue line. And while it's very air conditioned and very needed in a Florida park, it's not as creative or as interactive as it should be for an attraction like this. All it is just static images of animals, which makes the ride already feel bland. I think if they produced an educational video or even did a quiz that would stimulate the brain, keeping them off their phones, that would be better than just plain images. Like if they did something with TVs in the queue area, like how Tigress at Busch Gardens Tampa does at the front of their queue line, quizzing them about the Arctic and the animals that live there. That would be one more way to promote education in the park still. Side note, I know that ride opened in 2018, but I very much appreciate the quiz and the cue music while you're about to board Tigress, and they really should have put something interactive in the queue line for Expedition Odyssey because the capacity for that ride is so bad. Actually, both rides have such bad capacity. It's, oh my gosh. Expedition Odyssey isn't a bad ride, but it's a boring ride. And I see it again as another ride to try and compete with Disney, specifically their Soarin' ride at Epcot. And again, this is not helping SeaWorld Orlando stand out against the competition. I've heard complaints about the transitions of shots not being smooth and being a bit shaky, causing the ride footage to be out of focus, with the gold seating of the ride having more of a view of the ceiling than the actual ride itself. We will see if this gets fixed with the re-theme. But I think for Expedition Odyssey, they missed out on putting together an epic story for the ride that pieces together each video shown, which is why I think it was a good call to re-theme it to Expedition Odyssey Fire and Ice. I do hope that it is adventurous and that they create a great storyline out of it, and it's supposed to be about the dynamic forces of geothermal fire and polar ice and how those things end up shaping the Arctic, and I love it. SeaWorld said that they hope to have the updates done within 40 days, so we will see if it opens by mid-May. At the end of the day, I think people appreciate the idea of what SeaWorld was trying to do when Expedition Odyssey first opened up, but it felt cheap. And that's what a lot of people were trying to get at. I think it's very telling because literally on opening day, the letter O from the Expedition Odyssey sign fell on someone, and it looks like it was held up by duct tape. SeaWorld Orlando is also United's most popular park, so I think they're really trying to keep this park up to par. As always, I am hopeful for what is to come to Expedition Odyssey. And I feel like if this is a success, they should definitely do more attractions with storylines and ways to immerse guests. Around 20 parks in the United States have an S&S Scream and Swing. There are 6 of the same Skyrocket 2 coasters in the United States. Almost every park is trying to break records, like having the tallest, fastest, longest ride of its kind. And there is a growing trend of family coasters popping up at many theme parks every single year, like Fire in the Hole at Silver Dollar City, Penguin Trek at SeaWorld Orlando, Phoenix Rising at Busch Gardens Tampa, Barracuda Strike at SeaWorld San Antonio, Snoopy's Racing Railway at Carowinds, Flying Fox in Kentucky Kingdom, and the list goes on. Why does it feel like every single park is trying to do the exact same thing as the next? My biggest theory for this is that parks copy what other parks are doing successfully and replicate the same thing in their parks. And just like a domino effect, all of them are doing and adding similar rides, creating Instagrammable pictures for their food and walkways. and creating similar benefits with their tickets and offerings. Back then, theme parks were willing to build risky attractions in order for it to be unique and creative, like Rhino Rally at Busch Gardens Tampa or Sledgehammer at Canada's Wonderland. Parks having to rely on IPs is another way that there is less risk to a park when it comes to the process of creating a whole new world. And using proven to be successful ride systems and duplicating them in different parks is another way to reduce risk in your attractions. Parks used to be able to just sell tickets quick and easy, but now there is a need for layered pricing with benefits and add-ons like quick queues or extra experiences. Theme parks are not trying to be different anymore. They are trying to be predictably successful. They need people to spend money at their parks, but unfortunately for most attractions, it's taken the creativity out of it all while they are trying to standardize what it once used to be. Like I said in my previous videos, these videos are not here to bring hate, but to educate about Busch Gardens and SeaWorld parent company, United Parks and Resorts, owned by Hillpath Capital, a private equity group. I love these parks and I just want them to improve. I think with the controversies Blackfish brought, it has not only changed the way people perceive animal experiences, but also how people perceive the SeaWorld parks. I think not only that, but there is a loss of identity in both parks with thematic elements such as the Japanese fishing village in SeaWorld or the African themes in Busch Gardens Tampa slowly phasing out, making the educational aspect feel a little less curated. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I am not complaining about them being less educational per se, but they need to make up for it somewhere and improve the park maintenance and the overall immersive theming. These parks would not have to rely on new attractions or coasters every single year if they maintained their parks to be in tip-top shape, like the O and Expedition Odyssey not falling on someone, as well as investing money into the appearance of the park. I actually do think if United Parks and Resorts is doing something right, it's taking care of these animals. During their fiscal 2025 year, the company rescued and helped 825 wild animals, bringing the total number of animals it has helped throughout its history to over 42,000. I think they have taken more of a focus on helping hurt animals rather than capturing them for show. And I think this is what a lot of people are missing, that this is something that changed after Blackfish. For example, SeaWorld Orlando has done a lot to help rescue and release manatees back into the wild, and they have helped over 1,000 manatees. I think considering the little things about this that people might not know about SeaWorld, that shows that they do want to improve and find more ways to educate people about it, like how manatees need to be protected from the cold and the boat strikes and the red tide and so much more. But I feel like people have to take the initiative and want to learn more. Out of all the United Parks, SeaWorld Orlando gives me the most hope in terms of having a thriving park. But I do hope that my home park, Busch Gardens Tampa, as well as their other parks, can improve as well. I have much love for those parks. Thank you guys for watching Grace Adventures, where every day is a ride, and may your next adventure be epic.